Today we are doing a deep dive into a case that, well, it really just ripped through the community, moving from these initial, very shocking reports all the way to a major legal decision at the end of 2025.
That's right.
You sent us the complete stack of sources, the early police reports, all the forensic findings, and the recent legal documents on the murder of Kene Siobhan at the Diamond Housing Scheme.
Really tragic case.
It is. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. We're going to try and synthesize these sources to give you a clear, objective look at the facts.
The timeline, the evidence.
Exactly. The evidence that was recovered and the significant legal hurdles that are now facing the accused, Marlan DaSilva. This is, it's about more than just the headlines. It's about understanding the legal arguments around things like excessive force.
And intoxication, especially in a domestic context. And that framework is so crucial here because this case has these elements that just make it uniquely challenging.
Yeah.
Especially for the defense. We're looking at Kene Siobhan, a 27-year-old housewife and a mother, and the accused, Marlan DaSilva, who was a 32-year-old businessman.
And he had a firearm license.
He did. That's the immediate defining context. He was a licensed firearm holder, and critically, the entire incident was captured on video.
I have the video.
Which instantly turned what would have been raw police reports into, well, public and pretty irrefutable evidence.
The video really is the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yeah.
But before we get to the legal theater, let's just establish the undisputed facts from that night, the night the police were actually called.
Okay.
So initial reports placed the start of the incident around 8:00 p.m., a Saturday evening at the couple's home in the Diamond Housing Scheme.
Pretty standard setting for what follows.
It is. And the police account, it details this incredibly rapid escalation. DaSilva arrives home, a confrontation with Vaughn begins almost immediately, and the reports state he delivered the first physical strike.
A slap.
A slap.
Yeah. And that slap, that becomes the initial legal trigger point. The defense narrative, though, it really hinges on what the victim did next.
Which was?
Reports suggest that Vaughn immediately reached for a weapon, a knife, and then approached DaSilva. It was at that moment, according to the official accounts, that he pulled his firearm, his licensed firearm, from his pants waist and discharged multiple rounds.
The speed of that escalation, I mean, from a slap to a fatal shooting is just devastating.
Yeah.
But the sources reveal this crucial piece of information about his state of mind that night. He was highly intoxicated. Even though he's the one who called the police, his breathalyzer test came back at 83%.
And that 83%, I mean, that's a figure you really have to stop and absorb.
It's huge. What's the legal limit again?
The legally prescribed limit is 35%. So he's well over double that limit.
Wow.
This isn't just a detail. It's foundational to how the entire case gets argued. The initial investigation actually suggested the whole argument started because he was annoyed. Annoyed that Vaughn had called him home from a popular drinking spot on Main Street.
Okay, so if the defense is planning to pivot to a claim of self-defense, reacting to this knife threat, how does that level of intoxication, 83%, complicate that legal argument?
Oh, it complicates it immensely.
Does being that drunk change your ability to, reasonably perceive a threat?
It absolutely does. The legal concept is about intent and capacity. Now, while intoxication is generally not a full defense against a murder charge, the defense can argue that the extreme level of alcohol impaired his ability to form the specific intent needed for the charge.
Okay, so they're saying he was too drunk to have planned it.
Essentially. But here's the rub. Intoxication usually suggests diminished capacity, but the prosecution will argue the complete opposite. They'll point out that as a licensed firearm holder, DaSilva had an enhanced duty of care, an enhanced responsibility.
Right, of course.
So being grossly intoxicated while carrying a lethal weapon, which he then used, could be seen as a reckless, voluntary diminishing of his own capacity, which only compounds the offense.
So it turns the intoxication from something that might help him into something that actually hurts his case.
Precisely. An aggravating factor, not a mitigating one, especially for someone entrusted with that kind of license.
It makes you wonder then, with that incredibly high alcohol reading, what the physical crime scene looked like. Did the forensic evidence, did it back up a clear account of some kind of split-second defensive action?
And this is where we get into the cold, hard facts that the detectives gathered. The physical evidence, it tells a very, very specific story.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So the detectives processed the scene very thoroughly, and their findings are heavy. They recovered 4 9mm in spent casings.
4 casings,
then 3 suspected projectiles. Tragically, as we know, Vaughn was rushed to the Diamond Hospital, but she died while she was receiving treatment.
Now, we mentioned 4 casings and 3 projectiles, so that suggests 4 shots fired. But the post-mortem, the forensic examination, it revealed something that fundamentally challenges the idea of a simple defensive response.
It does. That post-examination detailed 12 injuries on Kenesha Vaughn's body.
12.
12 entry and exit wounds, all suspected to be from gunshots.
12 injuries for maybe 4 shots. I mean,
Yeah.
How is that even possible? That implies what? Rapid sustained fire.
It implies a couple of things. Rapid sustained fire, yes, and multiple entry and exit points. It could be that rounds passed through and re-entered her body. But regardless of the exact ballistics, that figure 12 wounds from a domestic dispute is staggering.
It is.
It speaks directly to the legal concept of excessive force. That is the core legal battleground here.
So the defense has to argue that pulling the gun was necessary.
They have to argue it was necessary self-defense because of the knife. But the prosecution is just going to hammer home the fact that the response went so far beyond neutralizing that initial threat.
Right. I mean, if the threat is someone approaching with a knife, the legal standard requires a proportional response, right, to stop the immediate danger. But how can they possibly argue that firing multiple times, causing 12 wounds, was proportional to a single knife threat? What's the legal move there?
Well, they will likely argue fear and panic, compounded by the intoxication. That it led to a rapid instinctual firing, maybe claiming a momentary loss of control rather than a premeditated intent to kill. They might also challenge the post-mortem findings, suggesting some are exit wounds.
But even so,
even if only 3 or 4 shots were fired, the fact that they caused 12 distinct injuries points to a sustained, lethal deployment of force until the magazine was empty or the threat was just absolutely incapacitated.
So that distinction between necessary and excessive force is everything. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, all this evidence, the casings, the injury count, that extreme alcohol level, it all builds a really strong foundation for the state's case.
It does. It moves the conversation decisively away from self-defense and squarely toward manslaughter or murder charges, based purely on the lethality and the excessiveness of the response.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the legal process itself, because this intense factual scenario, it led to an equally intense legal battle, a battle that culminated in that big decision on December 30th, 2025.
It was a fierce legal skirmish. DaSilva was represented by what the sources called a battery of attorneys, including some major figures like Sanjeev Dadadin and Everton Lammy.
So they brought in the heavy hitters.
They did, which tells you how serious this was, the resources they were deploying. And their primary, most aggressive strategy was to mount a no-case submission.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, a no-case submission.
Yeah.
It's basically the defense arguing that the prosecution hasn't even made a basic case.
That's a good way to put it.
They're saying, magistrate, even if you accept all the state's evidence is true, it still doesn't legally support a charge of murder. Just throw the matter out right now.
Exactly. It's an attempt to get it dismissed before it ever reaches a jury. It's a huge legal move. But in a major turning point for the case, the court flatly rejected that submission.
And what did they say?
The magistrate determined that sufficient evidence exists, and that's the key legal phrase, to move the case forward to the high court for a full jury trial.
So that decision basically affirms that the evidence stack, the alcohol, the wounds, the whole sequence, it's all robust enough to support a potential murder conviction. It has to be tested by a jury.
And the state clearly saw this as a high-stakes matter, too. That's reflected in their prosecution team.
Right.
Special prosecutors Nigel Hughes and Kishana Jefford were on the case, which just signals the complexity and the public interest here.
And while all this legal maneuvering was happening, there was this other powerful factor you can't ignore: the digital evidence.
The video.
The entire incident, as we mentioned, was caught on the family security camera. That footage showing the victim being gunned down in her own home with her young child nearby, it made its way to social media.
And it caused, complete shock and outrage, justifiable so.
It's an unparalleled factor in modern justice, isn't it? In a traditional trial, a jury has to rely on testimony to try and reconstruct what happened.
But here, the jury will see it. They will be presented with clear, visual, frankly, irrefutable evidence of the act itself. And you've seen the sustained campaigns for justice by Kenesha Vaughn's family and supporters, all centered around the brutality that was captured on that footage.
So this raises a really profound question. How does that visual evidence, which leaves so little room for doubt about the act itself, How does that influence the context of the upcoming jury trial? Does it change how the defense even strategizes?
It makes their job exponentially harder. They can't rely on creating doubt about what happened. They have to focus solely on intent.
On the why.
Solely on the why. They have to convince a jury that the person they see on that video, this heavily intoxicated licensed firearm holder firing multiple shots, was operating under a reasonable, if panicked, belief that he was in imminent danger.
But the video forces the jury to confront that disparity between the threat of a knife and the response of 12 injuries in real time.
Exactly. It makes the argument for excessive force nearly undeniable.
And the sources confirm the accused remains remanded, which just means he's being held in custody, no bail.
Right. Which, again, it just reinforces the court's perception of how serious the evidence brought by the prosecution really is.
So what does this all mean for you, the person trying to absorb this whole complicated case? We've traced it from a drunken argument and a slap through a reported knife threat all the way to a strong legal decision that there's enough evidence for a murder trial. And that decision is heavily underpinned by the forensic detail of those 12 wounds, the digital evidence from the security video, and, of course, that high level of intoxication.
The facts really just outline a situation where a simple argument escalated catastrophically. It was a combination of excessive alcohol and the immediate, unrestrained use of a firearm.
With fatal consequences.
Immediate and fatal consequences. And the commitment to a high court trial now ensures that all these fiercely contested facts, especially that question of proportionality, will finally face the ultimate test before a jury.
So the accused remains remanded. But given the incredibly detailed evidence we've discussed, especially that 83% alcohol content, which speaks directly to capacity, and the fact that he was a licensed firearm holder, which raises that bar for responsibility, here's the final thought we want to leave you with.
Okay.
What factors, beyond the immediate event, will that high court jury likely weigh when they determine the level of intent? Are they just focusing on that split second when the knife appeared? Or are they judging the long-term responsibility of someone carrying a lethal weapon while drinking to that level of excess? That's what we want you to be considering as this deep dive wraps up.